Okay, taking a look here at Purple Haze. It's from Phalanx Games, Kickstarter. Just delivered fairly recently, a couple, last week. Hasn't been that long. People may probably still be getting theirs, at least in North America. I know there was a problem too with some of or most of the North American shipments failing to get the Born to Kill expansion. Somehow I got lucky enough to get it, so I think my order is complete. I won't have to worry about them sending me one later. But I've been looking forward to this. It took a while to deliver, longer than expected, as per most Kickstarters these days. But once I got it, I was keen to pick it up and start playing, just because the whole concept of it sounded interesting to me, that it's a kind of choose your own adventure RPG-esque tactical combat Vietnam game, where you're controlling a squad of 6 Marines and taking on different missions. I just finished the 4th mission, which is the search mission, where you're looking for a squad that was ambushed and lost contact with. Basically, this is your squad here, and the Kickstarter came with this miniature, which I need to paint. But you use this as your squad marker. Typically, the squad marker is this little cardboard counter, but in this case, I'm using the Kickstarter special miniature. But you move around this like operational map, and each mission that you start shows you how to set up the various counters on the map. There's counters for where you'll have encounter spaces. Some are randomized, some are specifically set, and then there's sort of enemy spaces and your base and LZs and whatever. It varies by mission, like how you'll set this up and what you'll start your like threat and stamina levels at, and what time you'll start, and whether there's any time limitations or other various limitations. Like here, this mission you had to complete before sunset, so you put a little marker here to indicate, hey, if you get here, you're going to have to do something special. Each mission will have its own encounter cards, plus some generic standard encounter cards that you'll mix in. So most of what you're doing in terms of moving your squad around and moving through the entries of the mission, which these are all the sort of choose your own adventure numbered entries that you'll go through. And it's all lots of sort of if then, like if you complete a particular encounter, and it gives you some keyword things that you will note in your logbook here. You can see all the different keyword things, and the keywords will be in different colors. Some will carry over through the campaign, others will just kind of be mission based. All of these keywords will lead to sort of if then situations in the rules, like, oh, if you have this, then go to this particular, like here, note supplies, like so you found supplies in this encounter, so it may come up later in another encounter where it'll say, if you have supplies, then do this, if not, then do this. Like you can see a bunch of if then kind of statements here. So so this is pretty cool to as you go through the different parts of the mission, you'll accumulate these different things that'll have an impact on the later encounters in the mission. So it's I don't know, it's kind of a fun, anybody who liked choose your own adventure books, this is kind of similar. So that's adds some fun to the game. So basically, moving around this map, you've got all these terrain markers here. The terrain's going to indicate how much stamina you're going to burn, moving through the terrain, how much time you're going to burn moving through the terrain, and then the threat counter down here indicates your odds of running into the enemy. If you move around past enemy counters, any spaces adjacent or in the enemy counters, you're going to have modifiers to your threat roll every turn. So every time you move, you'll be rolling for threat to see if that slowly increases or potentially decreases or just stays the same. So all of that is handled when you're moving around on the operational map. If you run into combat, then you move over to the tactical map, and this is largely abstracted out. You can see here I had it set up from an encounter, from a battle that I had in the last mission, and these are all of your squad members. They were all over on their activated side, but their unactivated side's green. The enemy's over here. These guys are over here. You've got an initiative track that's like a tug of war. So every time your guys do something like fire their weapons or move or take cover or whatever, it's going to cost initiative that'll swing it back over to the enemy's side. Once it's back on the enemy's side, then your guy's done, and I'll move over to them. They could have, like, potentially have tactics chits that will come up here, and then they'll draw combat chits every turn that will be a random thing that they'll do that'll cost initiative and potentially give them attack die roll modifiers. So it's designed to play, the tactical combat's designed to play pretty quickly. Combat will end after all of your guys have had one activation, regardless of how many enemy you've killed. The reason it does that is just because you could end up, it could take hours. Like the idea is that a mission should only take an hour or 2 hours or so. And so, you might have 1 or 2 combats in a mission, but probably not more than that. And so the combat was, heavily abstracted so that you're not having to spend hours just doing a tactical firefight. So your guys will individually take actions to take out the enemy. These spaces are like hard cover, anything that has this red counter on it. And then you'll have a lot of these green counters, which will be underneath each of the enemy guys, depending on how many little dots they have on here. And those are soft cover, and soft cover gets eliminated by fire, but hard cover stays put, and all those things absorb hits before you get to actually hitting the guy. And the die number there is an indication of how many hit points the guy actually has. So, to get through all the cover that this guy has and actually damage him, you need to do 3 points of damage to eliminate the soft cover, or have, a capability on your weapon that removes excess soft cover, and then the hard cover is always going to absorb a damage. So you got to do more than 5 hits on this guy in order to actually kill him. They have enemy leaders and stuff that can buff their die rolls, and then when the enemy attacks, based on whatever chit you draw out of the cup, their fire will be based on, you're going to roll buckets of dice, and whatever focus die, and these will be the dice that you're trying to match the white dice to. Whatever die roll you get here is an indicator of which Marine you hit. Each Marine has a number on a d6, so it's kind of an elegant way to do the enemy's actions all at once and still have it spread out. The number of hits that they're doing are spread out amongst your Marines according to how they roll the dice. So it takes some getting used to initially to figure out the die roll system. It's basically buckets of dice where you're matching numbers on a d6 side you're trying to match to the purple dice, but you can match the gray dice individually. If they don't match a purple die, you're basically just subtracting a die if you just have matching gray dice. So like that was sort of the complicated thing. And then these come in and like the critical dice are multipliers and or critical hits, and all of it you kind of have to figure out. Seems cumbersome at first, but becomes pretty clear and intuitive after a couple of missions. By the third mission, I had it down pretty well. And they've got a chart here that shows all the permutations of the dice and how, based on what kind of pairings of dice you get, here's how many hits they do, here's what crits are, and so forth. So the player aids are all pretty good. The rules are thorough. I haven't found any situations where I've had ambiguities or real questions like, oh wait, what, the rules don't seem to address what happens in this scenario. seems to cover all the scenarios. It's just finding the very specific stuff that you're looking for in there can sometimes be difficult. It's not always clear exactly where you want to look, but I have been able to find everything. Just sometimes it takes a while. So, so far I've enjoyed it, and excuse me, man, losing my voice. So far I've enjoyed it. The tactical combat is pretty quick. Takes a while to learn, but once you've figured it out, it works pretty well, and doesn't take long, which I think was, again, the whole reason a lot of it was heavily abstracted. This is more of a choose your own adventure and narrative game than it is a tactical combat simulator or any sort of simulation at all, really. It's intended more to create an experience of what a squad might have gone through in Vietnam, like a narrative experience. And I think it's doing that pretty well. The writing in it is not far removed from kind of like bad fan fiction for like a Vietnam, like think of the movie Platoon or any sort of Vietnam movie you've seen that likes to throw a lot of the Vietnam lingo in, talking about Charlie and, getting back to the world, and, just like every kind of Vietnam cliche or like lingo related cliche you could think of is worked into the writing to the point where it's kind of bad. But the stuff that actually happens, the things you're reading about, are still very engaging, very interesting, and very immersive. but it is like they're just shoehorning every possible Vietnam lingo or Vietnam phrase, cliched Vietnam phrase that you can think of, that common soldiers might have used during the war, like into, like every paragraph seems like has something like that in it, some sort of, cliched term or word or whatever, which can be a little bit grating, but it still, ultimately creates an engaging narrative with what your guys are going through and how the encounters and the if-then sort of functionality of it all fits together. That makes it very entertaining, and it makes you want to keep playing to see what the next mission is and see what the next things you can do with your squad. And they gain experience as they go. That's sort of the RPG element. You fit them out with whatever gear they can use, and each guy has a different specialization. You've got your squad leader, your radio guy, your infantryman, who is kind of your like heavy machine gunner, your M60 guy, your scout, who can carry the sniper rifle and is good at sort of being, I've got him as my point man here, your demolitions guy, who's got the claymore and usually can carry a grenade launcher, and then your corpsman, who is your medic, and carries the med pack and gets a bonus when using the med kit when you're bivouacked or camping or whatever. So all of them have different specializations, and then your squad leader picks a motivation for like what he wants to focus on with the squad. So you've got like getting payback. So there's where you're measuring the number of enemy eliminated. There's keeping your men alive. You're looking to minimize the number of KIAs or breakdowns, or the one that I'm doing, which is advancing your career, where you're just focusing on experience received from objectives. And so that's the thing. Your guys gain experience as you as you accomplish the mission objectives of the mission that you're on, and they can get bonuses and things as the mission changes as they go through it. But you can also attempt to have your guys do things. If they do complicated trait tests or whatever, they can get experience that way. You get experience from fighting, and then you get experience from accomplishing your various objectives. You can also get things like boon cards that'll give them other little bonuses and stuff. So, and like a classic sort of dungeon crawl adventure, after you complete your missions here, then you go through like an R&R phase, and depending on how well you do on the mission, you can either take R&R all the way in Da Nang, or you're stuck on base or you might be able to go into town for your R&R. And this is, you know, die roll based, rolling on charts and stuff. So very similar to like the classic, you know, back into town phase in a dungeon crawler. So that was another little appealing mechanism of this particular game that I've really enjoyed. So between every mission, your guys can potentially recover some of their stress, like their combat stress. You'll see the little, the brain tokens here. Your guys have like a sort of mental or emotional capacity and a physical capacity. So, you know, think of your Call of Cthulhu games where you've got sanity and hit points, essentially. That's kind of what this is here. As you go through the missions, not only, you know, will they be taking physical combat damage, but they can also be taking emotional stress, because Vietnam, you know, was a particularly brutal and difficult war for the combatants that were involved in it. And so that's reflected during the mission in the various, you know, horrible things that these guys will see and or be exposed to. So all that is tracked as well. And as they accumulate that stuff, if they don't, you know, R&R is usually how you relieve that combat stress. And if they don't relieve enough of it and it builds up, then they start to gain conditions, which are going to be sort of permanent bad effects on them or whatever, that they'll start to stack up. So far, after the 4th mission, I have not had anybody who was killed. I did have one of my guys, Twister, E. Duncan here, Twister, my scout. He was hospitalized with a critical injury, so he missed a mission. But otherwise have managed to keep everybody alive and relatively unscathed. They've all had various light wounds over the course of the missions, but nobody's been killed yet. So we'll see how long I can keep that going before I may have to bring in a replacement if somebody gets killed. I think there's 9 missions in the core game, and then there's the 4 expansions, and all those have, I think, 3 or 4 missions each. And then the missions themselves are very replayable. There's some other videos, I think, that have talked about that. I think Zilla Blitz, his YouTube channel, he mentioned that he'd played the first mission 3 times and found it very different every time. And certainly, like every mission that I've been through, there's always like multiple of the keywords or whatever that I have not found. Like, oh, if you have this, this, and this, it's like, wow, I didn't even see any reference to those 3 things in the mission, the way I played through the mission. So clearly I could play it again and have a completely different experience, because there's many more keywords per mission to find out there, you know, as I'm going through it. So I think the replayability is definitely there, but currently I'm just blitzing my way through the main. I probably won't replay any of the missions through here or start a different squad or anything. I'm probably going to blitz through the first 9 missions and then see. Not sure for the expansions if you create a new squad or if you just keep taking your same squad through the expansions. I think it may be a little bit of each, because I think the Tunnel Rats one like has all these different rules in it, so that may be a different squad entirely that's doing the Tunnel Rats expansion. But I will cross that bridge when I come to it. But for now, really enjoying this, and am just focused on burning through the first 9 missions in the core game, and really having a good time. So if you have the opportunity to pick this up, and I'm not sure when it's going to be a retail, because I think it's still shipping to Kickstarter backers right now, but or GameFound. I think this is on GameFound rather than Kickstarter, but shipping to GameFound backers currently. So, you know, you may be able to pick it up in retail in the next month or so, but I would definitely recommend checking it out if you get the chance.